welcome to the EdTech Podcast. I'm Rowland Wells, creative producer at Educate Ventures Research, and I'm standing in for our regular host, Professor Rose Luckin. In our second episode of Risk with AI Learning Tools, I sat down with Dr Rajeshwari Iyer, CEO and co-founder of sAInaptic, the UK's most reliable AI marking algorithm for automated marking of free-form or descriptive student answers. Following on from last time, we discuss who needs a risk assessment for a learning tool and why. What is the goal of a risk assessment? And why push for a safety mindset? And why is evidence of efficacy so important, especially in the age of AI tools?
Yeah, thank you, Rowland. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure always to chat with you guys. Thank you for having me today as well.
Sure.
Very happy to share, some of our perspectives, our learnings. A lot of it has come from Educate Ventures, I have to say, because we were probably, we were in your accelerator program. So a lot of the things that we do is pretty much grounded in some of the things that we learned back then. We are in the business of using AI to help teachers with marking and giving high quality, consistent feedback, and also helping with the measurement of outcomes. And now we're sort of going one step further to be able to use the automated marking that comes from doing so to then closing the learning gap and seeing how we can use the insights to then recommend what the teachers can potentially use as part of the next step in that learning journey. It's not an easy thing to do because, personalization, as you might know already, exists, but it's all sort of mainly comes from the automated marking or multiple choice questions. So there's somewhat a framework that exists already on how you could possibly implement personalization based on automated marking of MCQs, but there actually isn't a very solid foundation or a framework, theoretical framework that we could just use off the shelf from literature. So we're hoping to sort of build that from our learnings, work closely with educators in the research sector to be able to do that. We started off with, the company started off with a product for the school sector. It's very much a formative assessment, homework and learning tool, specifically for GCSE sciences. And then now we're also expanding into lots of different things, actually. Difficult to find focus at the moment, but it's really, AI for knowledge assessments in anything. As long as you have assessments, there are questions beyond multiple choice. So it could be even multimodal data that, students have to submit. And the AI can be used to mark that. So knowledge assessments beyond multiple choice questions, that's kind of the gist of what we do. Like I said, as soon as we kind of started the company 3 years ago, we were already part of the Educate Ventures accelerator program. So we have been very much focused on developing an ethical tool, making sure that we know the learning objectives and the teaching objectives and the evidence base that we want to align with. And so we've always had ethical AI in the background. And it also helps because our team, we have a lot of PhD scientists. And so we know how important evidence-based work is and risk and analyzing risk and coming up with mitigation strategies and so on. That's kind of always been core of what we do. So I think one thing that is is for everybody, right? The short answer to your question, who is risk assessment for? I think the short answer is every stakeholder involved in the student's learning process and in the teacher's teaching process is responsible, and the risk assessment is very much valid for them. So, students, teachers, senior leaders, parents, often parents get sort of neglected in this whole conversation, but parents are very, very keen now they're asking schools, how are you using AI? Is it for assessment? Is it for creation of lesson plans? So everybody's sort of getting involved in the conversation. So risk assessment, I think, should be made available if schools are doing it, if EdTech products are doing it, it should be made available to everybody. That's my short answer. However, I think we know that practically speaking, it's quite hard because, now we have somewhat of a framework that's come out of Educate. But again, a consolidated framework that works for everybody, for every single tool, I think it's quite difficult. There are a lot of nuances. And so it's good to see that these conversations have started. and that there is, people like you are doing the work that's required to make these kinds of assessments available to everybody to use if they wanted to. But again, implementing and making it like a compulsory thing or a regulatory requirement, I think we're quite far from there, I guess.
You've got a lot of institutions which are sort of moving towards that mindset in terms of the safeguarding mindset, or rather they know how critical, it is to the sort of the ongoing safety of the students, of even the teachers, and the data, teaching people sort of data literacy, but also data safety. What are they entering? This tool, that tool, what is their sort of, audit trail online and things like that. But the practicalities of actually doing it are so difficult. I was literally just in conversation with an educator from a small school, and she had had the responsibility for leading on the digital strategy kind of outsourced to her. And, she was saying, well, I formed this working group. What are the sort of the next steps in sort of trying to escalate the conversation? They said even the head had a data science background.
Right, okay.
Yeah. But that kind of then the sort of the extrapolation from, that group of individuals working on that piece to, well, what's the strategic kind of work that we can implement? We can write policies, etc. We can get GPT to write policies for us, but what are the active things that we do, on a sort of a daily or a weekly basis to do with sort of evaluation and monitoring of tools and so on? We can talk about it, but sort of taking the concept of risk assessments and kind of applying them to these learning environments where they just have no capacity really is
absolutely
just so sort of challenging. I suppose this kind of leads into the second question. The risk assessments are for are for risk mitigation, as you said. For yourselves, when you're thinking about any sort of new features of sAInaptic, I mean, where does the sort of the thinking around risk mitigation, where does that enter into like the development process? When does that flag kind of come on? When you're thinking, well, we're going to develop this new part of the platform or this new part of the platform.
Definitely, the very beginning of the design stages itself, because this is, I'd say, from a risk assessment point of view, probably assessments is, medium to high risk, especially if, feedback is going straight to students without any moderation by a teacher. I mean, that's quite a risky thing to do, given AI can obviously go wrong. So yeah, definitely from the beginning, we're always thinking, what is it? What is the end goal? So how is this going to improve a learner's learning journey? And how is this going to improve the teacher's teaching journey? And, what the risks are and how can we build within the app itself? Because our tool is ultimately it's a users use it from a web interface. And so it does come down to always adding features in order to mitigate the risk that we're anticipating from the first feature that we thought we would be building, which, it's not easy. It just adds to development time, feature release, and so on, money and time spent. But I have to say, though, we do not have a strict policy in place, but it's just it's become part of company culture, I would say. That, we are thinking what the risks are at every stage, because it is an assessments tool. It is feedback at some point from the AI is going straight to the learners. In ours, of course, it is always moderated by the teacher in most cases. But, simple things like from the beginning when we launched, we always had in-app feedback loop present so that students always felt that they have a voice. And it's not the AI that's under control. So they're very much, in bold. They can literally tell us if the marking was correct, it was incorrect. I do agree that not all students have the ability to be able to use that feature. But at least, we've thought about it and we've made it as user-friendly as possible for students to voice their opinion And it's the same with the teachers. That features obviously a lot. It's used a lot more by teachers because they understand the value of it immediately. It all comes down to education, right? We took the first 1.5 years before the tool was launched as a commercially available tool to just educate our audience. This was, pre-ChatGPT. I mean, now obviously we don't have to tell teachers or students what AI can do. People are finding us and they're coming to us. But back then, it was literally 2 years ago, right? We had to. So we took the time and, we very patiently and very closely, we worked with the schools and students and teachers to educate them on what the tool does. It's not 100% accurate because that's, again, as humans, we do think that if a machine is now doing something that we do, it has to do it better than humans, right? But actually, that's not true. It kind of does the same as what the inter-rater variability of marking is the same as what you would find among humans. But then it's not quite obvious to teachers and students or us, our end users. So we took the time to explain that to them. So 100% transparent on what the risks are that they are getting into and teach them literally on how they can mitigate those risks. Yeah, I think it is, as soon as it's an AI tool, it does become quite integrated within the product development itself, making sure that we're aware. And like I said, our team, also the senior leadership team, has academics. And I think that helps to a large extent because we've had to go through this and we've had to think about this for every project that we've done during our PhD and our postdoc and so on. So I think that does help, and we're at an advantage of that.
Can I ask, maybe if we're sort of thinking about kind of the marketing or advertising of tool, the logical thing to do, the reasonable thing to do would be to sort of have the on the web page or on sort of LinkedIn or wherever you're kind of advertising it, is to say, well, we have this feedback feature so that we can know that users are having an experience and if necessary are able to sort of give us our thoughts and so on. Do you think that there would be merit or significant merit in companies coming out and saying very upfront, these are or sort of AI learning tool companies coming out at the start and saying, these are the kind of risk mitigation features
embedded within the tool itself? Yeah, absolutely. I would think so. Yeah. The thing is, I think risk mitigation comes after identification of risk, right? So it's equally important then to say that actually these are the risks inherent to the tool. However, we've thought about it, we've identified them, and we've also, integrated within the tool features to help you mitigate as much as possible. And all of that information and all of those interactions that come through, people clicking and submitting their their comments within the app and so on, their feedback, all of that is then it's the EdTech tool developers. It's in their interest to look at those interactions, analyze them, and then take appropriate actions. There's one more thing, which, confidence levels is something that we keep talking about. And like we have teachers often ask us, oh, but why don't you have a confidence level? If you told us that this particular question was marked with a very low confidence level, then we'll be sure to go back. But then if a question has been marked with 98% accuracy or confidence level, then we won't waste time looking at that. That's a perfectly valid thing. But you can't have confidence levels unless you've had enough data, not only answer data, but also interaction data, right? To be able to then say that, yes, this question actually is not marking as accurately as we would like, and therefore it's marked with low confidence. So please, 100% make sure that you reviewed all of the student answers coming for this particular question. But again, it's a risk, right? The accuracy level on a per question basis varies. And we do, so when we onboard, or even during demo, I believe, when we do demo of the tool to the teachers, we bring it up as a point of conversation, because not all teachers would have thought about this problem unless you started to use it and so on. So it's having, I think it's just having that patience. Yeah, you can, use that to your marketing advantage, but I don't know how many would understand unless it's in a conversation. But yeah, it is definitely, all of this is in the interest of the company developing these tools. I mean, ultimately, we want people to trust what we're building. The other thing also, I mean, I think this whole conversation has come up because of generative AI. I mean, AI has been there for a long time. And I mean, if you look at, diagnostic tools in the health tech sector, you can't bring something out into the commercial world unless it's gone through all the regulatory process and so on. Yeah, so it is even more relevant because of, some of the inherent issues that generative AI has, because it's in effect generating new things, right? That's why it's called Gen AI. Whereas some of the other more traditional AI tools, development of an AI model itself has, risk assessment and risk strategies. You've got to hit a particular TRL, technological readiness level, which is sort of, the government's regulation and their framework that we follow. So when you're developing a tech tool, you have to hit these benchmarks in any case to be able to say, yeah, okay, we're sort of at this level, so we can now commercialize and so on. So because of Gen AI and the fact that people are not doing it from scratch, they're just building something on top of a model which has already been built. That's why it's even more important to have these risk assessments in place. But for a company like ours, which is quite different to, wrappers around ChatGPT, I feel like it was almost just, it came as a natural step, basically, because you've got to take these things into account when you're building an AI model in the first place. Yeah, I think we digressed from the marketing point, but
it's interesting, and it also it calls up this other kind of idea that I've had for a while, in that when you say that it sort of emerges kind of organically, or rather naturally, from not only kind of your own sort of education and your own backgrounds, but that it becomes a kind of just a logical thing that you think, well, what are the kind of risks inherent with this tool, and that you're relying on the kind of the kind of emergence of your own sort of set of ethics to help guide you're thinking about it. But I guess my own sort of thinking is that there is always this, not to say that you've got it wrong, but there is always this kind of danger that most people believe that they've got the right kind of beliefs about a thing already. They already kind of think they're ethical, and the sort of the dangers of that being one of your assumptions. Most people are ethical, but they may not be as fully ethical as they need to be if they're, especially developing some kind of behavioral, intervention for learners or for young people. And, something like the logic model, which is that kind of, tool that's based on the theory of change that we talked in the old sort of accelerator program, has that kind of key component of ensure that you're putting down your assumptions at every part, because you may think that you have the right beliefs about how this technology should be used, who should be using it, and how they're going to use it, but you may be missing something, and you may have that kind of it may be like in your blind spot that you're missing one thing, and it's because you sort of already assume, well, why would I need somebody else to tell me how to be ethical? I already know how to be ethical.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is sort of going deep into psychology, I guess, and also a sort of philosophical question. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Logic model has been sort of, if I were to say, the bane of what we do, but I think we were sort of right in participating and adopting that framework from the beginning. I guess just going back to the point of assumptions, the first initial assumptions that we make, I feel, yes, they could have a lot of just, bias from who we are, our backgrounds, and so on. But I think once you've got a tool out there, it's being used by thousands of people, then your early adopters kind of start to bring in their, we have a never-ending feature request, and then we go back to the teachers. So it's that dialogue. So hopefully not only do our assumptions get cleared and they change over time, even if it's just for a particular feature that we're thinking of rolling out, but just, as a tool overall, I'm hoping, I obviously don't have evidence of this, but I'm hoping that with these ongoing conversations with, end users and other stakeholders, could also include, investors and other advisors, that these, our own inherent biases get filtered out or they get diluted as it gets, reformed. So I think what I'm trying to say is you start with a set of assumptions, but that's not written on, stone. They are constantly evolving. And probably that's for the better. The schools as test beds. I do have a few things to say about it. I think it is important, like schools do have to be test beds because it's impossible to get a wide variety of user feedback and so on if we don't actually deploy the tool in different regions and start to get user feedback from all of them. Because again, if you're selling only to private schools, for example, then that's already there's a huge bias in there. I do appreciate fully that it's too much to ask. They're already, teachers already struggling with, lots of different things to do. And then imagine telling them, oh, please, can you use this tool for 6 weeks and give us feedback? That's just ridiculous. We've done that, right? We are culprits of having done that ourselves. Some schools have been really, really good and, they have done that for us, especially in the first 1.5 years when we were collecting data and all of that. It was so much to ask of those teachers, but they all helped us to develop this tool. But I don't think if this was not the case, I don't know what would be the other. It's quite hard, I think, to use simulations and so on. I'm just trying to see if we could adopt something from maybe a healthcare sector or the fintech sector or something like that to see how we could avoid putting this additional burden of schools being test beds for tech tools. But I actually don't have the answer. Maybe we've just not thought hard enough. But I think Professor Alison Clark from UCL, I think she was trying to bring together some sort of a national test bed for tech tools. But it was an ambitious project. But it'd be nice to have something like that. But again, I would think that if it's, you have a set of schools who subscribe to this sort of being a test bed, if the schools are not churning all the time, then I feel like the feedback that we would get from those set of schools will just become more and more diluted over time and it would get tired. Yeah, I don't know what kind of model that would take, what that'll look like. But I feel, it is important for schools to be test beds, unfortunately, because ultimately it's, otherwise, tech people can just develop tools and features and never, ever get used. So we don't develop anything unless it's come from a teacher. So I definitely at least wanted to add that.
I think that's slightly at odds in a way with what I've heard from sort of people within the team. I think it's really useful to actually have that included in the podcast because there's always that kind of tension. And I agree. It's what alternative is there? You can only sort of gather so many of your own contacts, relative
exactly
to do it. You've been listening to the EdTech Podcast, hosted by the team at Educate Ventures Research, the innovative boutique consultancy and training provider dedicated to helping education organizations leverage AI to unlock insights, enhance learning, and drive positive outcomes and impact. Visit educateventures.com to find out more.